I am ashamed to admit this, but I only just recently found out that Welsh is a whole language. And not just an accent. I really didn't know that. And here we are.
Well, that shows the bigotry of the rest of the world. And it's not going to surprise you. It's mainly because of the English.
Yeah. No, it's fair.
The English did a lot of horrible things to suppress the Welsh language throughout history.
What? Oh, really? Like actively did?
But actively, similar to the way like American schools did it, right? With like Native American cultures, like just kind of blocking the use of language in schools and stuff. Like you weren't allowed to use, Welsh kids weren't allowed to use their native language.
I'm not sure. I've never heard that before. I don't doubt that that's possible, but I've never heard
America,
about
I don't. Yeah. If I'm barking up the wrong tree, fair play. I don't know the history, but I know it was definitely a thing in Wales.
I was gonna say it's actually always been a point of contention in the U.S. that there's no official English is not official state language. We have no
really
declared English. Yeah,
American English doesn't count.
But it not by government decree. I mean, like there is an actual American standard English that would be, would have dictionary delineations between the British versions and Australian versions and blah, blah, blah. But the point is the government does not officially endorse, like we are this is one of those.
What's contentious about that?
Because the
racists, I'm going to guess racists.
Well, I won't make that leap, but there are definitely typically conservative elements that say, you come here, you learn the language. And there's also a lot of immigrants who agree with that. They say, I came here, I got on my feet, and part of that, I take pride in the fact that I came here, didn't speak English, now I speak English. But there's also the aspect of being such a super pluralistic society, like in California, huge swaths of things are in both English and Spanish because they realize huge amounts of people that live in Southern California. So do I. I've always thought that was cool, and it's like our sort of half-assed little taste of what it's like for Europeans who live with languages in all directions, which I always envied. But that is. I do think it is a point in the U.S.'s favor that it's always been
multilingual.
And there's always been an uphill battle at the idea of there being like a governmentally declared you must pass a test to show English proficiency in order to do X or Y here, which we've never had.
Wait, so you don't have to do that if you go for citizenship?
I don't think so.
I have no idea what that test is.
That I don't either. I wouldn't be surprised if there are not Spanish language editions of the citizenship test. So it's sort of backdoored in, but
Spanish or something. It's pretty. No, that would be wrong. It would be 38% Latino.
Well, yeah, I mean, but
I probably fucked that entire statistic up. It's
I
high.
have no idea. I don't know what I'd be curious about is the number of
census
people.
data is really interesting. Anyway, I didn't realize this until recently. There's an inherent kind of flaw in the way that ethnicity in the census in America is basically anyone who has a parent who isn't white is classified as not white. So you have there's often the census data kind of basically inflates.
Would that not be correct?
The perception of. Well, that's the question, right?
What even defines white?
What even defines white? That's an arbitrary line, but also it means that a lot of people who would identify as white or would identify as of mixed heritage are not kind of in other countries. The census kind of allows for folks to self-identify as mixed.
Interesting.
But also
in America, you're kind of essentially locked in. Say again, sorry.
Well, you're saying, the mixture being the nuance. Like if you're biracial, you may not identify. You may identify as I'm biracial. I'm not. Sure. I'm not white or black, even if I'm so-called white passing or whatever.
And in American census data, I don't believe you can define yourself that way.
I don't know.
In terms of those, which has some
well,
interesting
then would you be both? Like I remember.
Well, that's what's tricky from a
Tiger Woods
from a
had issues with that.
point of view.
Like he belonged to whichever race it was convenient at the time. When he was cheating, he was black. But when he wasn't, he was. When he was America's sweetheart, he was diverse. Like they just really pick and choose which he was based on what was.
This is also the very insidious side of this is where all the Jim Crow history is of the whole kind of purity test, where someone could be they had like one black grandparent like 9 generations back, and it's enough for the like under the Jim Crow laws. There was the whole one drop of blood is all you need to sort of qualify as being subject to those prejudices and those sort of institutionalized block. But that's why it may even be this. I have no idea if this is accurate, but it may even be that part of the reason why the census data is slightly unnuanced is as an attempt to move away from those like that notion of are you purely this or that? How do we prove it? Kind of, because there's a real dark history attached to that. You're black, but are you really black, or are you really white? Like,
I listen to a lot of very boring.
No good comes of that.
I listen to a lot of very boring statistics podcasts and stuff, and I think that's the nuance is always the tricky thing, because it's always or often we'll say often done with the best intentions, but you can lead to these really interesting kind of unforeseen consequences. The killing of the Welsh language was 100% a deliberate plot by the English government, though. That was absolutely
again. I had no
an
idea.
intentional thing.
I've heard it spoken, and it's really wild.
It is really
it's an awesome
interesting.
language.
Very different. It's like this Tolkien sort of like very ancient sounding language. It doesn't.
Did you know that
Tolkien
Mike Bithell
got
is
that from
Welsh?
I remember.
I'm half Welsh.
Yes, I remember from our
speak
discussion.
very little Welsh, so I don't. Is that on the Wikipedia?
Yeah, they put it on your Wiki. You didn't see that? Somebody put was half
I don't
Welsh.
look at my Wikipedia very often.
They tweeted it at us when
Okay.
the episode came out with the Mike Bithell lore updates. Yeah, yeah, it is really cool. The Welsh accent is one of my favorite accents in the world. I love it. Big fan. Glad we covered all of these topics on Play Watch Listen. This is why everybody tunes in.
Yes, it's the gaming podcast the people have come to expect, isn't it?
But related,
data.
I did intend to talk about Ghostbusters, which I love that if my arm disappears, because I don't have my green screen up because I have a dev kit in the background and you're not supposed to show them on camera. So
Does
I
it
just
invalidate that to talk about it then?
What?
No, it's specifically
Oh
photographing.
yeah, you're
Austin.
allowed
I've
to
got-
mention that you have one.
Yeah,
You just
I've
can't
got the
show
same.
on
I think
camera.
I've got the same contract. Yeah.
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 Oh, very odd.
Yeah,
are
they
no
just don't
difference.
want people to see what they look like, I guess. And so I put my Ghostbusters background up, but it keeps making my arm disappear. It looks like this ghost is eating me, and I think it's a feature, not a bug.
Is that
Good
the
job,
new
AI.
slime? I've not seen the movie. Is
That
that the new
means,
slime? Though? Is that what
means
that,
you're made
is that
of
what
metal.
That ghost is?
I am made of metal. Yeah, he's a muncher, is what he's called.
It's a muncher. Okay.
He is a muncher.
He's like the Slimer species.
Pretty much, yeah. Played by I forgot the actor's name, but his face just suits it so well. So Austin, I saw this. I know you haven't seen it yet, right, Mike?
I've not yet. No.
Audience, we're talking about Ghostbusters Afterlife.
Should we put a spoiler warning and give more than 8 seconds of?
We can talk about it at length, but like I feel like we can not do spoilers initially, and then we can.
Let's
get
not
to
do spoilers because I've not seen it yet.
Oh, that's also.
I'm gonna watch this on a plane at some point. Yeah.
I thought that was your whole. I thought you didn't care about.
I'm not saying actually. You know what? I'm not. I honestly, I reckon I could make. Given what I've seen from trailers and stuff, I think I could probably make a good guess at 80% of what's.
You
in the
could
movie.
probably guess the
It's fine.
entire movie.
Yeah, I think I know. I think I could even guess like the heartfelt final scene of this movie from the trailer. So
I think all of it.
Josh Gad
okay.
is the answer.
Josh
I did not
Gad,
know
that
that.
was going to be my guess because he plays every single character that looks like that in
It's
animation
brilliant.
now.
I had no idea.
really enjoyed the movie. I was like, this is great. What a fun time. Saw reviews. Did you know it's getting like 5s and 6s?
I saw that it was getting panned, and
Critics hate it. I would
What's
not
the
have
main
guessed.
criticism of it?
I didn't
Yeah,
read
I
it.
Main
haven't-
criticism of it.
I haven't looked up
Didn't
to
read it. I got outraged and I
Yeah.
moved on. Yeah,
I was
didn't
just
see
like,
it.
I'm obviously not outraged. I don't care. I'm like, my
know.
attitude is whatever the fuck you want. Review whatever you want. But I didn't expect it because when I was watching it, I was just having such a good time that like I was like, this is great. Like, what a fun film. I had an excellent time watching this. It was funny. I liked the characters. It's certainly like you could argue you only liked it because of nostalgia, but I only watched Ghostbusters for the first time last year. So
Yeah,
no.
see, well, and likewise, I've developed such an allergy to banking on nostalgia as a way to win over the audience that I actually will have the opposite reaction if a thing feels like it is my enjoyment of it is predicated on it invoking nostalgia of liking something else. It will make me hate it. That's part of why I hated the last Ghostbusters, the Melissa McCarthy, Kristen Wiig. It felt like they were trying to rehash the movie in a sort of lazy way, and it was such a shame because they squandered the outrageous talent of their cast in such a fool's errand kind of way. It was such a shame. I went into that movie so excited to love it as a super hardcore Ghostbusters fan, and it felt like the only things to like about it were the things that were sort of dependent on having this sort of mindless nostalgia. This film is, yes, it does have some elements of nostalgia, but it doesn't feel like it's trying to win me over by doing the South Park Member Berries play of, hey, remember the Ecto-1? Remember Slimer? Remember Proton Packs?
I would argue that it does that a little bit.
To me, it doesn't do that because it's, to the extent that it does, it's actually organically part of the story. The whole point is, this is a thing that was forgotten, and now they are discovering a connection to a past they had no idea of. To me, the movie is full of interesting choices, like the first two, but especially the first one.
You are right that as the kids are discovering things that existed before, that in theory you could argue was the member berries. Hey, look at the car. They're excited about it, not because of who it belonged to beforehand, but because of what it does for them at that point in time. Which means that it doesn't feel like the sole purpose of them being excited to see this vehicle is nostalgia. It's literally useful to them. Tremendously. And not just that, they don't even appreciate it. That's like their arc. That's the whole point. They don't even realize that it's special until they realize it. To them, it's like, who's this junk by some guy we never met? Like, it's that was such a smart choice. And the other thing that I love about it is that the first two are, namely the first one, is like a quintessential New York film. New York is a character in the movie for sure. I mean, even in the second one, culminating in the rescuer, the savior of the day is literally the Statue of Liberty. Like they make a whole point of New York. The second one's plot is predicated on the bad vibes of New Yorkers manifesting as literal slime. And the only thing is if they can appeal to that elusive good side of New Yorkers. And what I love about this one is they go, okay, set it out in the country. Like, how do we move as far away from that as possible as a way to say, what's the real heart? What really matters at the soul of this? Because if this is another like city movie, we start rehashing all those archetypes, it's just going to get lost in nostalgia. And to me, it felt like it very purposefully built a relationship in a reactionary and an interesting way to the original. There's so many things that I loved about this movie that I it's not perfect. Like there were a few little things that I would be like, I wouldn't have done that necessarily, and blah blah blah. But there were some things, some jokes that didn't land for me. If I were to guess what the criticism was from reviews, and again, I was still so surprised because I thought it was really good. I really would have thought everyone liked it. The big bad guy plot may as well be a rehash. Like you could argue,
fair point. I can see that.
It makes no difference. It is the same concept with some of the same enemies, but like, what do I care?
I agree. That is one of my quibbles. I feel like they almost pulled off a way to kind of like make it feel inevitably related to the first in that regard.
Yeah.
I'm saying this in intentionally vague ways, but I
appreciate it. Me and the audience are very grateful.
Yeah, but I agree that could have gone either way. I didn't love that about it, but I didn't hate it because it was doing well otherwise. But I fair point to that. Yeah, that they did a little bit Force Awakens that aspect of it.
I think they did.
Can I ask a question?
Sort of a
on
reskin.
Yeah. You may.
It is interesting, and I've not seen it.
I didn't get a chance to weigh in on if he should be allowed to do this, but okay.
Austin, do you think that Mike should be allowed to ask a question?
I'm just not sure if we're
host of the show.
I was going to say, I'm not sure if we're a democracy or if Alana's kind of
No, Austin, I would like to hear if you would like Mike to
speak.
The
king says I may do this. So
Austin?
I don't really
all right. I'm curious. Go ahead,
Mike.
This had better be an interesting question that kicks off 10 minutes more conversation, because otherwise, why is Slimer green? No. No, my question is, from the trailers and stuff, from everything I've seen of it, it does feel like weirdly non-cynical in terms of like its humor. It seems very kind of warm and fuzzy, and nostalgia's a part of that, but like just more generally, it just seems like it's that kind of upbeat movie. I'm sure there's some darts in there. My question, like thematically, does it feel, to me watching the trailer, it feels like a kind of jump from like Alien to Aliens, where it's like, yeah, we're using the same iconography, the same characters, but like this is a completely different tone of film. Does this feel like that kind of jump, or does it feel similar to what's before?
Here's what they did.
Yeah.
The first film, tonally, is Bill Murray.
It's like cynical New York, everything sucks, working
Murray.
Class schmoes
You
trying
get
to do stuff
what that
against
dude is
the
about.
evil government.
His sense of humor, you get it. The second film is Paul Rudd. So they took what you think of these two humans and they just blew up Paul Rudd. So the humor is Paul Rudd's humor. Like across the board,
which feels like completely like different to me to what
he's very Ant-Man. It is different. He's like it's not super different, but it's like he's like a giddy, like happy-go-lucky type, and I feel so are all of the kids who are now our heroes. And one thing that I really like about them using children to replace the Ghostbusters in theory is.
I'm sure the Ghostbusters aren't in this at all.
Those four,
I bet there's not a key scene where they save the day.
Those four men are children. And you can't do that twice. I think that's kind of like what the last movie, which I didn't hate, for the record. A lot of people hate the old female movie. I didn't hate that movie. I was fine with it. I thought it was fine.
It was a solid piece of...
fine.
It was a McDonald's Happy Meal.
Kind of,
fine.
yeah. But it's hard to do that twice with adults because they're all really childish. They're kind of dumb. You can't do it twice. So then having it be kids who are learning and making these mistakes is a really good way to make that not just feel weird. I don't think it's Alien to Aliens. I don't think it's that different. It's still Alien. It's just you put Paul Rudd in it.
That's interesting. Here's my version of that. I'd largely agree, although I think Paul Rudd, I thought he would be a bigger focal point of the movie.
Yeah, I'm just saying trailers. I think that he is a good person to explain as the tone.
Like your yardstick.
Yeah, exactly.
Your thermometer for the movie. Yeah.
But the thing is, when it was first, like, the backstory being that Jason Reitman is the director, the son of Ivan Reitman, who directed the first two films, and is like a legendary comedy director in his own right, though with these films, with like the Ghostbusters is kind of...
It's Juno, right? Did he do
Jason
Juno?
Reitman did Juno. He did Thank You for Smoking. He did one of my favorite films ever made, which is Up in the Air with George Clooney. And the thing is, his movies are all like... I remember a friend of mine, when it was announced Jason Reitman is making a Ghostbusters sequel that's like, you know, unlike the Kristen Wiig, Melissa McCarthy one, like this is a direct sequel. It's not a reboot. Set, 30 years later, basically in modern times. And a friend of mine was like, Jason Reitman doesn't make funny movies though. Like the Ghostbusters is at heart fundamentally comedy. And Jason Reitman makes like the Sundancey, dramedy, introspective, they have their funny moments.
He makes chortle films. He makes films that NPR listeners watch and go, oh yes, that's very clever. I see what you did there. Sorry.
Yeah, you don't think
it's
of
like
Juno.
Me watching a Shakespeare comedy. I'm laughing, but I'm also, no one believes me that I'm finding it funny. Like, I get it.
Yeah, it's sort of his movie. And like, to me, Up in the Air is actually like just a heart-ripping, beautiful film about life. Like it has a couple, good lines. But
or it was.
Juno's funny, but it's in a very gentle, it's not, I wouldn't really call it a comedy except in the broadest sense of like, comedy. It's not a heavy movie. It's not a super dramatic movie, even though it sort of could have been given its subject matter. And Jason, that's his specialty. He's amazing at those kinds of movies. And so when it was like, he makes movies about people trying to figure out life. What the hell business does he have to do making like a wacky, let's shoot Ghostbusters with proton packs? And what I love is that he clearly adapted to, like, he onboarded a lot of his father's sensibility in making it, as sort of, there is plenty of Ghostbusters-y like silliness that had.
But the first movie had a lot of heart, and it was about like some guys starting up a business, and
but not like not like Jason Reitman's movies though. Like
I don't know that I've seen any Jason Reitman movies.
Oh, you have to see Up in the Air. It's an unbelievable masterpiece. But
Thank You
here's
for
my point.
Smoking
Oh
is
no,
like
I have seen
as well.
Thank You for Smoking.
And actually, Thank You for Smoking is probably the most overt comedy of his, because it's so over the top in its ludicrousness of like this guy who's the tobacco lobbyist. But the point I was going to make, and what I loved, is that the movie has its silly, like I remember the first time I saw in the trailer, you see like Paul Rudd looking at all the little mini Stay Puft Marshmallow Man and all those. Like I had this reaction of like, you know, that's so hard for me to square with what I expect from a Jason Reitman movie. And what I love is that it actually is exactly from my point of view, the Ghostbusters that Jason, son of Ivan, would make, for the simple reason that the whole premise is the estranged granddaughter of deceased Egon Spangler has to go, you know, inherit his abandoned farm in the middle of nowhere, and they move to this place to clean it up because incidentally she's broke, and she's barely knew her father, you know, this so-called famous world-saving Ghostbusters who no one's heard from for a long time and became this total recluse, and she hates him, and it's like the whole movie is about... You're right,
if you take the Ghostbusters out of that,
some subtext
it's very
there,
fitting.
Right?
Oh, it does feel that way, because
That's
like there's
like,
totally commentary on like, you know, Dad didn't love me. He was too busy working.
I had the same thought. I was like, I wonder if this is a movie of Jason saying, Dad, I didn't get to know you during my childhood because you were too busy being a Hollywood icon. But this movie is my, I love you and I forgive you. Because look what you emboldened, like what you enabled the career and life for me to have.
So supposedly Ivan was on set the whole time.
Conjecture.
I've heard that. Yeah,
and
he was on set,
was being
right?
an arsehole to him the whole time and was telling him like, this isn't good enough. Yeah, apparently. Like, he was there just being like, this isn't good enough. What are you doing? You don't know what you're doing.
I mean, they've done certainly a lot of press together in the aftermath, so it clearly didn't lead to a
No, I think it was okay. But, God, I'm always like, man, my parents just are so great. They're like, everything you do
really
is incredible.
Great, yeah.
Look at you go. Like, none of that.
That's the subtext of this podcast, is Alanah has wonderful parents.
I do have really good parents. I always feel kind of guilty about how supportive my parents are. But yeah, I did wonder, even watching it, if that subtext was there. And you are right that if you remove the Ghostbusters from that plot, that actually is in line with
Jason Reitman movie.
Juno, or that's super interesting.
And I loved that. It's like this movie. It's one of those that as I was driving home and I was sort of thinking about it, Angela and I went and saw and we were talking about it, and it was like the more I talked about it, the more I realized, man, this is everything that I would want from this movie. You know, like again, there's a few little things I can quibble with, but and obviously, you know, there's a few spoilery things that I won't say, but broadly speaking, I was and also I gotta give love to my friend and colleague Rob Simonson, who had the unenviable task of figuring out how to score a movie like this when the original is such an iconic score by one of the legendary composers of all time, Elmer Bernstein, you know, who famously would get pigeonholed in different genres 10 years at a time. So like he did, you know, The Man with the Golden Arm in the 50s and wrote this very noteworthy jazz score, and then was like the guy for
I was going to say,
gritty jazz
Ghostbusters
scores
is quite jazzy, isn't it, if I remember right?
Kinda, not really.
It's got that...
Yeah,
yeah, he's going to do it.
Yeah, it's got that, but it's more orchestral with all the like...
You're fucking gold on this podcast, Austin. It's amazing.
That sort of the theme.
That's true. Yeah, you got a little bit of that horror kind of vibe.
And it's very like almost 50s horror side. And Rob did such a good job.
I thought it was great of mixing the comedic,
sort of the old and the new,
and horror into a score.
There's almost no cue in that whole score that isn't somehow infused with Elmer Bernstein. Like there's almost even the most seemingly nothing cues where you think, oh, he probably just wrote some little simple thing for this. It's actually him riffing on a simple corollary moment in the first. And again, it doesn't read as nostalgia. It reads as homage and continuation. And maybe that's maybe it's like, if I like it, it's that. And if I don't like it, I call it nostalgia. And maybe I'm just biased. I can acknowledge that I may not have the most precise metrics here, but it really did feel like he absorbed the heart and soul of it to such a sort of perfect degree and carried that torch forward. And it's not an easy task.
Totally.
But yeah,
it's also
anyway.
It's not easy anyway. Like when I saw Ghostbusters, I saw it as an adult. I thought it was perfect. I was like, oh,
it is.
I expected this movie to be one of those movies that like people liked when they were kids, that they like just continued to be fond of, and maybe it was a bit funny,
like Star Wars.
Kinda.
I'm sorry, I just
Star
like to
Wars.
poke the bear that is the comments. I apologize. I'm so sorry.
But like,
That was pure sadomasochism there. That was,
To me, that's to me, Masters of the Universe is what you just described. It's one of those that on reevaluation, it
that's
doesn't work for me.
fair. Yeah, and I mean there are also bad Star Wars, but
There's a reason.
Ghostbusters, I was like,
which one's a lot?
we don't need to get into that. I was like, Ghostbusters, I was like, oh, this is just a fucking perfect film.
It's like Back to the Future, where you go back and you watch it and you go, there's literally nothing. There's
There
not
was
one
nothing
frame
wrong
you
with
can
it.
change.
Nothing wrong with it. And I feel like I'm like, I always find something that I'm like, I didn't love that though. That was a bit.
And very unformulaic as well.
It's
That's
a
what's great
tiny
about
bit
these
rapey.
movies.
That's it though.
Ghostbusters.
There's a little bit
I
of
forgot that scene.
consent
Yeah, I forgot that
issues,
scene.
but
Yeah.
even that I was all right with.
I can't even
Which
think of
is
the
not a
scene you're
thing I'm
talking
proud
about.
of
You're talking
saying.
about like the Keymaster stuff?
Yeah, doesn't he like make out with someone without her knowing, or tries to when she's not herself?
Yeah, there's a bit of Bill Murray creepiness.
Yeah.
Not that Bill Murray's creepy.
No, I feel like you're remembering it back, isn't it? He
I
opens
might
the
be
door.
remembering it backwards.
She's possessed as the like it's the gatekeeper and the keymaster, and
But I think he
and-
still tries to hit on her.
well, he starts to, and then he realizes she's actually not herself, and he tries to put her to bed and like leave her and say like, okay, this is not okay. He definitely doesn't take advantage of the
I think
No,
there's
he
a couple-
doesn't.
I think
But I
what
think he
she's-
maybe gets close. I don't remember, to be honest.
There's a couple of like it's not
I
like
could be wrong.
it's not like overt and massive. No one's canceling Bill
No,
Murray. It's
again,
okay.
I was
But,
fine
like,
with it.
It was like there's like a couple of little beats, Austin, where it's like a little knowingly like, oh, I'm being a gentleman here, but crikey, she looks attractive. There's just a few looks to camera that are like comedy of the era, but
that of
wouldn't
the
do
era
it
would have been
necessarily
fine.
now.
But again,
to rewatch it to see it. In my mind, it was always very above board because it's because he doesn't realize at first the extent of the situation, and then just thinks maybe she's being weird, and then it's kind of like, no, actually,
I feel like I remember something when like one of them was in bed specifically that I was like, ugh. But again, it wasn't enough that I am not thinking it's a perfect film. Like I was like, this movie is fucking incredible. Whereas, yeah, I mean, Afterlife, I could definitely dig to find more issues with, and I imagine most of the criticism is of, like you said, they Force Awakens it a little bit. It really is a rehash. But when I go to
does
read
it
the
feel like they're
reviews,
trying to reboot it? Like, does it feel like it's setting up a franchise? Is it that kind of movie where you're
there
like,
is
oh, this
for
is what the
sure
sequel
another
would be?
one in the making.
Right. Okay.
I know that.
I will say one of the perfect little glimpses of why the first one is perfect is I've always loved that there's always kind of multiple layers of humor happening in most scenes. Like there's sort of funny things that are, kind of the obvious forward-facing thing, and then subtle, and there's a million good examples. But my single favorite is at the end after the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man has exploded and you don't know the outcome, and you see everybody kind of emerging out of the rubble, and you see the Ghostbusters kind of getting themselves up, and they're completely covered head to toe in marshmallow, and they convene in the center, and Bill Murray just comes walking in from off screen completely clean, and they never acknowledge it. They don't explain like, how did he avoid all and it's just like, of course he would, he just somehow wasn't posed. And it's everyone's like, are you okay? And it's, no, I'm fine. And it just, they just move on. And that, even when I just like, I'll be like in traffic and that image will pop in my head
think
and I'll
about
burst
that.
out laughing.
Yeah,
It's
I get
so
that.
fun. And it's full of that kind of thing where you can't, I just always wonder from a screenwriting standpoint how they hit on the, and like which of those were discoveries made while shooting.
That's what I was going to say. Is I feel like I
versus
bet some of those
scripted
if
and-
somebody on set was like, "This could be funny." You're like,
because I mean that movie
That
I
would
think
was
be
there's
funny.
actually, I'm going to look this up. I think there's an anecdote that was literally because Bill Murray was like, I'm not going to cover myself in shaving foam. I think that was
it
like.
could be,
a
and it's
thing.
fucking hilarious if that like.
But if so, then brilliant use of it to do a joke, as you say.
Yeah.
That's kind of like the Indiana Jones shooting the sword wielder guy just because he literally couldn't shoot for more than 10 seconds at a time before diarrhea running to the toilet. So like they made an iconic bit using what they had to work with. It could be one of those. I don't know, but to me the movie is just a wash. And another one
it's
that
incredible.
I always,
It's
Oh, here we go.
so
I've got the.
good.
So yes, Bill Murray refused to be covered in much. He's got a little bit on him, but he was like, I don't want all of that on me. Whereas Dan Aykroyd thought it was the funniest thing ever, so is noticeably covered in about twice as much as every other character.
It's
So
literally
it was
covering
just them
everything
on the
except
set,
his
like-
eyes. Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah, it's like apparently it was a very personal decision,
That's
which I
amazing.
respect. That's a respectful director,
Especially
like,
because it
going
came
to the
out
level
being
the
funny
actors
that
were.
way, and it did. That is awesome.
And it's very in line with the rest of Bill Murray, like his character. It feels somehow very aligned with all of his
Totally.
other character moments throughout the movie. You know, like it feels like a Venkman thing. That's why
You get
he
the sense
wouldn't get.
You get the sense that like they knew how to use because it was a bunch of SNL alumni, right? So they were all kind of all knew each other and all knew kind of what would work.
I don't feel like Afterlife is as candidly funny as the original Ghostbusters, but it's still like I still laughed out loud, and I feel like I rarely do that in a
that's
cinema where I actually like it's not just like it's like an actual proper
That was my
chuckle.
concern watching the trailer. Like, as again, like being the voice of ignorance. Like I, from watching the trailer, genuinely got the impression that it was like going to be very kind of superhero movie-esque kind of like action fare rather than like a straight up comedy. Because I think that first trailer was very kind of inspirational music. I think Ghostbusters
I
theme
think
being
they
played
get
on
the
the
blend
piano.
really well of
And that's what's coming across from what you're saying. So
Yeah.
it's actually, you guys have actually sold me on the movie a
I
lot
think
more than the trailers did.
Yeah,
I think.
I definitely
I'll take
also
that
laughed.
check.
The kid podcast was for me the most consistently funny in the movie. I found
There is a kid called Podcast.
He calls himself podcast.
and he's always like
amazing.
narrating.
because he has a podcast.
Yeah, and to
Solid,
me,
yeah, no, I
maybe it's
respect
because
that.
I
Really
felt
good.
seen by that.
No, he's great.
That-
He's great.
But he was, and I felt like they used him well. That he didn't. It always runs the risk of becoming like a shtick that you're like, okay, we need his obligatory thing, and it kind of walked to the edge of that for me a little bit. But there was another little bit that's like, again, I laughed out loud. Was there's this Keymaster thing in the original where Sigourney Weaver is transformed into this like glistening flowing dress, and kind of like the iconic Jeff Goldblum open shirt Jurassic Park thing. There's this pose of her like lying there with her leg propped up, and there's a moment where they recreate that with Paul Rudd, and that killed me. I as soon as I saw
I
him,
bet he pulled it off, though. I bet he pulls it off.
yeah, seeing him pose as Sigourney Weaver, I was like, see, that's a love. That's like them going, okay, how do we, if you want to try to make the audience remember things, do something with it that's not just lazily recreating it. And that was an example where
And also,
I
the
actually
audience
laughed
does want
at that.
Well, and
the
it's,
audience wants to enjoy
and
those
it's independently
moments,
funny. That kind of thing is funny
true.
whether you've seen it or not.
Yeah, it's true. You could actually have no idea that was a reference to the
funny.
original, and it's just to see him all seductively posed. It was very
Yeah,
funny.
he was great. Also, the actress who played the mother, I didn't know who she was, but I also thought she was fantastic. The little girl who's the lead, also wonderful. Finn Wolfhard, most people would know from Stranger Things. I mean, I think the whole cast was really great.
Yeah, the girl, I especially, I can't remember her name. I looked it up and I've already forgotten her name.
Is it very Stranger Thingsy in tone? Because I think that's the other thing that the trailer definitely was trying to
So
imply.
I did see some criticism, like when I vaguely looked it up, where I saw somebody say that, but I didn't feel like it was Stranger Thingsy.
So is it just people seeing kids on an adventure and going Stranger Things?
Yeah, but then why aren't they saying it? You know, it.
Well, I remember when it came out, they said, "Oh, it's a bit Stranger Things." It's like, I think you've got your. It's like
Flip
when
that
you see
back
kids
around.
saying that. The best one was when I saw someone saying that that Avatar had ripped off Halo in terms of its spaceship design, and it's like, no, Halo ripped off Aliens from Jim Cameron.
I think I said when we were talking about Dune, I had this weird thing with Dune after reading the Wheel of Time series where I was like, this is just Wheel of Time. But obviously because Dune came first, it was like, how dare you rehash this storyline of these 15 fucking books I read. But no, I don't feel like it feels Stranger Thingsy because Stranger Things and it, to me, feel like kids teaming up to these little friend group with their little internal drama, teaming up to take on a bad guy, and they're brave and the kids are saving the day. This feels a lot more, again, like Ghostbusters, except that they are just children, which is that this ragtag group kind of ends up together and is like, I guess we have to figure this out. I don't know. And everything just like kind of breaks and they're just like different characters solving a problem. It's less like heroic than I feel like a Stranger Things or an It.
That's cool, because that was yeah. I don't want my Ghostbusters to be heroes.
I mean, it
they
has
are
taste of
heroes.
that. I
They
mean,
end up being heroic.
I mean, even the
but-
screenshot you have in the background was like an example of, you know, them trying to sort of step up to the
But
plate.
they mess it up every step of the way.
True, I agree. To its credit, like it's not. Also, honestly, half
They're
the
meant
reason
to be schmoes. They're meant to be kind of slightly shit. That's
Yeah,
kind
they
of,
are.
yeah.
And so
They're
is their
in-
tech, which is like, I love they're still using outdated tech. So they everything's broken and they don't know what they're doing or how to use it. And I feel like that worked really well.
yeah, there was just so much.
Oh, cool. You've sold me.
I don't know though, because like, again, when I saw it's the Rotten Tomatoes is 63%. The audience score is 95%. And it's just so surprising to me because I had no idea what the reviews were. Obviously, it came out on Friday. It's doing really well at the box office. But I've not really seen impressions.
But Rotten Tomatoes is a terrible, again, like going back to the statistics, a terrible way of handling the metrics.
Every time that I have to
large group of
explain it to
reviews.
someone, they're like, does that mean 6 out of 10? I'm like, no, it means 63% of people thought it was good.
Yeah, if your scale is binary of shit or good, then you're going to get so much variance that.
But I mean, there are
doesn't
literal
make much
scores of
sense.
5s and 6s. I think IGN gave it a 10 out of 10, but there are.
It doesn't deserve a 10 out of 10 either.
No, I don't think so either. But I mean,
that
some
should
of
be
these
very
I've heard
reviews.
it's the Citizen Kane of Ghostbusters. That's what I've heard.
Some of these reviews, it's so funny when you read the top critic excerpts from Ghostbusters or any really review on Rotten Tomatoes. Like, what are these people trying to say? This is from Mark Feeney from the Boston Globe. It has its moments, but they don't make up for a general flat-footedness and tendency to wobble. They're saying the movie is flat-footed?
Yes. And
Just-
has a tendency of wobbling.
Let me tell you, okay, as somebody who did journalism for a long time, your job is to make things as understandable as possible. The fuck are you trying to say?
In defense of that review, that I have no interest in, presumably the rest of the review would give you that context.
Why would your lead-in line not be clearer? The next one
'Cause
directly
that's
below that.
So often on Rotten Tomatoes, it's not the lead-in. That's the interesting thing. On Rotten Tomatoes, often it's just a quote.
And
like
maybe
from
Rotten Tomatoes
3
picks it
paragraphs
rather
deep.
than the reviewer.
Oh, they definitely do.
Okay,
yeah. It's a
that
Rotten
actually
Tomatoes
excuses it.
thing.
But the next one underneath is from Hannah Strong from Little White Lies, and it says, haunting, but not in the good way. What does that mean?
That's someone who had the line, but then had to sort out the review to kind of
Did you
justify
find that?
it.
Did you find it scary? What are you trying to say?
I'm assuming what she means is that it's like overburdened by its connection to the previous film.
Oh, she's definitely being cute. Oh, like haunted by previous.
It is haunted by those films in a way that doesn't do it service. That's my guess about what Hannah of
Hannah, you
Little
are
White
forgiven.
Lies means.
The next negative one is from Aaron Newworth from We Live Entertainment. While there's a very nice core idea, there's a lot of missing texture that ultimately didn't make Bustin feel too good this time around.
Oh,
See, again though, having fun, right?
They are having.
These
they
are
are
not the
having a good
lead-ins
time.
to the articles, though. These are like conclusions. On Rotten Tomatoes, I think they often just grab a conclusion or whatever. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we don't need to do another episode on the problems with criticism, do we? I guess.
So there is one here that says Afterlife eventually reduces to the cheap appeals of nostalgia pandering. Again, I'm not surprised that some people feel that way. I think it's not hard to make that case. I did not feel that way. It's super interesting, Austin. You didn't feel that way.
Yeah.
I know a lot of Ghostbusters fans who didn't, but
See, and
I
that's
don't have
why
the nostalgia. So
and I very much
think it was
did
sold
feel
that way. It
pandered
was-
to
sorry,
last
Ron.
time.
yeah.
It was similar to. It reminded me of Lower Decks, which is like the animated Star Trek show that came out, which was genuinely like my favorite Star Trek in years, like genuinely really good. But all the early stuff for that implied it was going to be kind of a nostalgia reference heavy thing. I think that's something that definitely seems like a trend that if you're making a franchise installment, selling nostalgia with a trailer, they must have done some metrics. That must be the thing that they think is going to get people in theaters, regardless of what the actual reality of the thing is. Once you see
That's
it,
the Netflix
I think it does have the
Masters of the He-Man show. I think it is just called Masters of the Universe. That's the issue with that one is He-Man is almost not in the first half of the season whatsoever, but the trailer is almost entirely He-Man. And people were mad about the lack of He-Man, and I feel like they maybe wouldn't have been because Tila is still a cool character, but when you market it with that expectation, people get pissed off. But my thing
That's
with
an
this
interesting
movie,
conundrum, though. Like, because if He-Man was the draw of the original, You want to make sure you capture that audience and just hope they're going to give you a chance to realize like it's not quite. We're not rehashing the original series.
That's true. You do have to get them interested
It's also a
somehow.
challenge of this split season thing that a lot of shows do now, where it's like I assume they all find him in the second half of the season, and it feels like this triumphant appearance.
Well, he is
if that
in
was all released
the
in one
first
go,
half
that would give
of
you
the show. But
I've
it's
complicated.
But I do expect that he will be back in the second half.
You would think that your He-Man show would end with He-Man looking awesome, but yeah, that split maybe has caused a weird. It's happened with a few shows,
especially
where Netflix have split them
if
like
you
that.
don't write for that. Like it's entirely possible the
Exactly, the
writers
team may well have
know
not
that.
known that's what was coming. Yeah.
But my thing with Ghostbusters Afterlife is like, anyone who doesn't like it, I never want to say someone's wrong because I don't agree with it. I'm at a point with this movie where I would love to talk to somebody who doesn't like it, or maybe I should just read some of these reviews to like get the perspective because I was so surprised. And this one, I'm not making fun of this. I genuinely don't know what this is referring to. There's a reference here that I don't understand. This is Ian Simmons kicking the seat. For a movie that took decades to put together, Afterlife plays like the equally tired The House with a Clock in its walls with Ghostbusters branding sloppily applied to a shoot the first draft sensibility. What is The House with a Clock in its walls?
That's a Jack Black movie.
Yeah, it was
based on,
Eli
like, a
Roth.
Kid's book, I think. Yes, that's right.
I didn't see
It's
it.
a different movie.
Strange reference.
But it took decades to make. That's an
It
interesting
did.
take.
And it
Is
was also
did it?
finished 2 years ago, but they wanted to release it after COVID, so it got delayed. So people would go to the cinema.
Well, fortunately, COVID's been absolutely
And it's
solved,
gone.
so
100% gone.
just-
Did you say?
Ghostbusters.
gone. No lasting impact.
Related to that, I saw an article that said that Variety basically claimed that the new James Bond is despite a $700 million plus global box office return, they claim is still $100 million shy of breaking even, and it's the highest earning COVID era film so far to date.
Wow.
I still haven't seen it. I've been dying to, but I just haven't made it
why
there
I
yet.
really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I've only heard universal praise. I've not heard a single person didn't say it's anything.
But they had some interesting financial stuff, right? Because of the sponsorship side of it. Did you?
I don't
hear
know.
that?
I mean, it
Because
was
of
one
like
those,
Omega and what was the vehicle?
Well, because all that stuff
always
was in
Astra.
there, but because the film was delayed, all the products that were product placed came out, and they were, we've now moved on. So I think there was some. I don't know how deep.
So
it
they
went,
had
but I think there
extra
were some issues with
expenses.
like sponsors. But
Wow.
well, sponsors were like, "Well, you're selling a watch that came out 2 years ago, so we don't want to pay."
Well,
you
the
anymore."
Omega
Yeah, because
watch.
James Bond has forever been subsidized by that. That's how Bond always has so much expense and value in it, is because they literally subsidize it with product placement to an extent that most films do. But James Bond, that character has such cachet that they can get ridiculous amounts of product placement.
but the product placement would have that. Why would that hold back their profitability on the tail end? Like it's not. It is.
It's not the no. It wouldn't hold back their profitability, but it wouldn't hold back their earnings, but it would lower their profits
That
because
Seamaster-
the initial product costed more.
It has been sold out for ages, though. So, like, I don't know how you quantify that. In any case, it's probably, regardless of if they profit or not,
Wouldn't change their gross, but it would change their net, Austin.
well, they would have broken a contract, and thus Omega's going to be like, you broke the contract, though, so give us money, because that's how businesses work.
I don't know, but
or we're withholding money, or we want a refund of our money.
Yeah.
for the record, it was essentially a rumor, and MGM put out a statement saying that's a bunch of bullshit, and it's been very good for us, and we're extremely happy with it. Like it outsold the Fast and the Furious movie, which was
It's done incredibly internationally.
Wait,
Not
so
so
you're
great
saying
domestically in America.
Someone said Variety.
some anonymous source was quoted by Variety saying that the movie was going to lose $100 million despite earning $721 million. And MGM came out and said, well, thank you, unnamed source, but we can tell you on behalf of the studio that we're very happy with the results, and it has definitely not lost.
I could see it being true, though, in terms of, like, especially with, if you think about how many times they had to reboot their marketing process, like, that film was heavily marketed for its initial, like, to the extent that, like, Daniel Craig was on, because it was right at the start of the pandemic, right? Daniel Craig was, like, on SNL the week it was
I mean,
meant
yeah,
to-
they released
it
the
yeah,
Billie
you're
Eilish theme song ahead of the movie's release, and then as
So
a
we
single.
always- yeah.
And then she won a Grammy for Best Song for Visual Media at last year's Grammy, and the movie came out fully a year
That's
after.
wild.
Which I think is the only time
But
that's probably ever
means,
happened.
but the classic thing of like the cliche is a movie, the amount of money a movie actually costs is the budget of the movie. Then you double it for all the marketing spend. If you think about like they had to basically do 2 rounds of marketing at least on this, and then some stuff in between.
It could be.
It might well have like it might not have been the movie's production budget, but like the marketing alone, rebooting that marketing a couple of times could genuinely have like caused
For
them a
sure,
lot
cost.
of
It
expense.
says, this is from Business Insider. They say that it cost $250 million to produce, and that the opening weekend was just over 84 million, and they expected it to be over 100 million. But
So let's take those numbers. So 250 to make, 750 made worldwide so far. Because I literally just watched I watched way too much analysis stuff. I watched like something about the box office. on this
Moneybags
film
Mike, you
just
know what I'm
before we come
saying?
on. I just really like numbers.
yeah, you love
but
capitalism, dude. I get it.
I love capitalism. Know your enemy, Alanah. Know your enemy. Also, anyone listening who is also into numbers, watch the Defunctland hour and 40-minute documentary the Defunctland made on the queuing system at Disney World. It's genuinely amazing.
Just leave it. Just
really
leave it.
good. If you're a nerd, it's amazing. It's like literally about traffic flow within theme parks. It's
Cool.
Oh, it's lovely. Anyway, back to this. Like, if it's made 750 worldwide and it costs 250 to produce, common sense kind of the wisdom of the standard wisdom is that you double it. So it's 500 million it costs to make and market. If they did have to reboot their marketing, and I'm right that like they would have, and probably they didn't, but let's say they did put in like double the marketing because of this, then that does bring them up to 750, which means they are basically just about at break even, which would put them quite close to that line.
Although the
potentially.
claim was that at 720 they're 100 million shy still, so there's definitely some money unaccounted for even with the
They'd be
napkin math.
30 million short at 720 by what I'm saying. Like they
Yeah.
would be close.
Either,
It would
either
be
way,
close.
apropos nothing, and shifting gears since I mentioned Billie Eilish winning a Grammy for the original song for motion for visual media category last year. Today, this morning, they announced the new round of Grammy nominees, and this is a thing I was going to bring up and ask you guys about. Well, we're pretty much at time, but I have to put out there. I have to put a shout out because I'm very proud of my friend. There's this girl I've been kind of on again, off again, sort of mentoring is probably too strong a word, but being an ear to give advice for. She's a young.
You're the wind beneath her wings.
No, she needs absolutely none from anybody. She's a true wunderkind. By age 19, I think had performed piano on Ellen like 7 or 8 times, and she's Quincy Jones was mentoring her as a young kid, and her name's Emily Bear. She last year. She and a friend started writing songs for fun on Instagram and TikTok under the premise of what if Bridgerton was a musical? And it went so viral, like literally in the many tens of millions of hits, maybe even hundreds of millions, that they ended up essentially producing it as a proper record, and this morning got Grammy nominated as
Whoa.
Best Musical Theater alongside like Stephen Schwartz and Les Mis revival and all
Oh, that's
these other
amazing.
That's interesting.
She's like 20, and I think her cohort Abigail Barlow is I think like 21.
Wow.
And they performed bits of it at the Kennedy Center earlier this year, and like they've had this just outrageous.
They must have gone to like Netflix and got the rights.
That's my
to
thing,
do
is that
to,
legal?
like release that commercially.
No, they don't. I don't think they're
I
actually
mean, it is
using.
if you get the permission after
I don't
the
think
fact.
they're
If Netflix
using.
is smart, they're going to.
I don't think they're using anything that's actually copywritten because it is all.
The IP
I mean,
isn't?
I mean, I don't know how the specifics of this particular aspect of it works because they are referencing the story and characters, but it's not referencing. They don't use any like artwork for the album cover. Is the two of them. The album
Parody could potentially save them.
And,
Like, I don't know what
but
the
that
lines
said,
are.
of course, Netflix.
Like even
and,
Weird Al Yankovic had to get the rights, so as long as they're not
no,
using
wrong.
the theme tune, they're
A
fine.
cover does not require rights. Weird Al has
Weird
never.
Al Yankovic got the rights for most of the songs he did.
It's not needed. It's absolutely what's called a compulsory license says that if you are making a cover,
Oh, it might have been like a nicety then. Maybe he did that.
He may have-
to be
yeah,
cool.
he may have
Wait,
gotten,
so he doesn't need to get licenses for songs. Wait, really?
if you're making your own version of a song, if you're doing a cover, the artist, the copyright holder, and intellectual property owner cannot stop you.
They
You
do
have
on
to-
YouTube.
No, well, they can't stop you from
We have to pay
commercially
them, though,
releasing.
right?
You do have to pay.
You have to pay.
Yeah, you do have to pay a
Got
royalty,
it.
but they cannot.
But they
bar
can't
you.
stop you.
They cannot
So
stop.
if
No way.
I was a pop star and a different pop star that I hated wanted to cover my song, I couldn't stop them.
Correct.
Wow.
And
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
it's you just have to get what's called a compulsory license, and that's why now there are right and wrong ways to file
Music
the
law
paper.
is so
It says
weird.
with Weird Al, it says Al does get permission from the original writers of the songs that he parodies, but while the law supports his ability to parody without permission, he feels it's important to maintain the relationships that he's built with artists and writers over the years. So
There you
it's
go.
not
He's
required.
doing
It's
it-
respectful. Fair
Yeah,
enough.
no way.
Oh, that's cool.
Point being, though, on this Netflix Bridgerton thing, they definitely did get the attention because it went so viral. They definitely got the attention, and like
Oh, if you're Netflix, you throw every bit of support you can.
and they
behind this
did. They,
idea. It's
the
free
cast.
marketing, yeah.
I was tweeting about it even and stuff. I think, and like they definitely got a lot of love. But I was just so insanely happy for her to have this happen. But it also, I was talking to a friend about it a couple hours ago, and it made me realize it might be the most extreme example of success of something that is effectively fan art. And it made me wonder, what would be an example of fan art that spun off into its own fully legit thing? First thought I had was League of
50
Legends.
Shades of Grey,
is the
yeah.
obvious one. Yeah. 50 Shades of Grey is like the absolute, like,
The biggest one.
incredible, massive one, yeah.
Made the most money.
Billions
That was based on Twilight, if you didn't know.
Oh, really? I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
It was
Fanfic.
It was fanfic
Yeah,
of
it's-
Twilight.
I've never known that.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
What else?
Well,
That's
that
what
probably,
my head
yeah.
straight away goes to. But
Because my brain first went to like Counter-Strike and League of Legends, which were effectively community mods on existing games that grew into $1 billion.
Forgotten
freestanding.
City, you could make a similar case for. Forgotten City came out this year. It was originally just a Skyrim mod.
Fortnite was basically saved by
That's different.
an ode, let's say an ode to a different game.
Yeah, but that's
Yeah.
different.
Different
That
game. No, we don't want to anger the epic gods.
odes, shall we say, are
Shall we
there's
say,
plenty
yeah.
examples of odes
So you're
becoming
saying
successful, but I
fanfic
think
in
something that's
particular?
explicitly like this was. It's literally called the unofficial Bridgerton musical. Is the name of the album.
That's so
Like,
cool.
Well, there's quite a few speculative musicals, aren't there? There's quite a few musicals that are based on like existing IP that were initially made without permission and then pitched basically once they were completed. That's been an arc for quite a few musicals, right? Am I right in saying that?
yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I have a friend. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this publicly, but I have a friend who did a very popular TV show and thought it could be interesting as a musical. So he started writing it to then go and pitch to the studio and say like, okay, I've written a few songs. Are you willing to kind of produce this and like see it through? So like that, I know that he undertook that to, and probably did so knowing that there's some precedent for it. But this
I mean,
was
any
purely
pitch, I
just,
guess, any pitch for an IP is fan fiction until
Hey,
the IP owner
God of
gives you,
War.
I suppose, doesn't
but
it?
this
Just
was never
Greek
supposed to
mythology
even be,
fanfic.
this was never going to be commercial. This was just these two young girls who were
That's very cool.
and they wrote the songs live on Instagram. They would literally turn on Instagram Live and sit and like brainstorm, and she
No
would play
way.
piano, and they would.
That's
and
so
it's
neat.
the entire creative process, which to me is like, I want to vomit thinking about that. Like the idea of turning on a camera while I work is unfathomable to me. But yeah, it made me think. I wonder if because Counter-Strike.
People would 100% watch that, by the way, Austin. If you put up a video that was you basically like pottering around figuring something out, they would 100%.
I've streamed
thing
while
is-
doing invoices before. Because I'm bored as
just-
shit.
to me-
So talk to me while I do these fucking numbers.
To me, creating is a fundamentally different muscle from performing. And if someone is anywhere, even within earshot, my brain goes, "You're performing right now." And creativity, which is about curiosity and is about exploring and is about failing, I basically mitigate the ability to fail because I now am performing. It's like if I'm on stage,
I'm just
not
saying
gonna.
I don't ever stream any of my work because for the exact reason I would feel so put upon by their eyeballs. I wouldn't be able to do it.
The best case scenario is I'll make something very safe and very generic because I'm
Exactly, yeah.
Like, I don't
You'll do
wanna
something
look
just to show
like an
off to
asshole.
the room
Yeah.
rather than
Yeah, makes sense.
I've had friends. My friend Andy Schatz, he'll go code on Twitch and stuff, and just like actively like open the door while he's working on a game. And we've talked about that before with regard to music. And I'm like, not a chance in
do
hell.
that with writing because then I would be distracted from the writing. Like, I write best when I'm not doing anything other than just putting words on a page. But I have done editing streams.
Well, I need complete
before.
isolation when I'm writing.
Yeah.
I can't even have anything.
No, I can't even use my phone. Otherwise, I just won't do it.
I'm right now. I'm a week away from my. I'm on a week, like, basically sabbatical from my team just to write some stuff.
I've seen you tweeting though, Mike. I've seen your tweets. You've been tweeting about it. You gotta cut that shit out if you want to get writing. That's how it works.
I have written. If I told you how many words I've written in the last 2 days, you would be okay with my tweets.
I'm gonna throw one last random curveball, but
Go ahead.
Epic acquired Harmonix today. Did you see that?
I saw that.
I did.
That with the conjecture being that it's about expanding the whole virtual concert thing of Fortnite.
Well,
and like
Fuser is Harmonix,
yeah,
right?
it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like Rock Band.
Yeah, I mean, the Rock Band part is more exciting to me because, like, I still frequently play Rock Band Guitar Hero with 2 sets of friends who have, like, the full kits, and it's fucking awesome. Like, having those parties and still playing those is awesome. So then potentially bringing those back and maybe figuring out ways to, like, make them internet safe is super exciting. But I feel like, yeah,
Fuser wasn't particularly successful, even though it's a really interesting concept to me.
it is
I mean,
cool.
it's right in the wheelhouse of the stuff that interests me.
There's a lot of just music nerds over there. Like, it's not. I think people think of them as a studio that just makes games about music, but like the people who work there they're basically everyone who works there is a musician. It's ridiculous. So it's also just from a hiring point of view, if Epic have identified music as something that they want to do more with just generally, it would make a lot of sense. It's called an acqui-hire, basically like acquiring company just to hire all the people who work there. Like they could see, even if there's not a direct, like, we are going to put this team on to doing something within
you just
Fortnite,
want
they
all that
might just be
talent.
like, we just want all that music talent in-house.
It is
makes a lot of
interesting.
sense.
I feel like obviously they had those full concerts inside of Fortnite, and Travis Scott was the last one, maybe, I don't remember, which looked very cool from what I saw of them. And I think that Fortnite as a platform probably doesn't get the respect that I feel like it deserves. You know, like, Fortnite is memed to hell. It's the kids' game right now, but what Fortnite does as a platform is really fucking cool.
Plus that Travis Scott concert, I mean, you're talking about tens of millions of simultaneous viewers. I mean, like, as a concept for
Who
music
get to interact.
venue,
It's neat.
like, it's a wild new frontier of, like, it definitely made the entire music industry go, maybe there's a new frontier for concert giving that we've wildly over, because the music industry is just perpetually on life support going, you know, how do we reclaim our former glory days where we used to be kind of a financially relevant part of the entertainment economy, you know, now just so heavily dwarfed by film, TV, and video games, that games suddenly offered this window of, like, you know, we can kind of maybe do a cool thing together.
Well, throughout the pandemic, there are a lot of artists who are advertising like they're doing a live show on Twitch, and I would never buy any of those because I know what that looks like. It is people in a room playing instruments with bad audio quality. What the Fortnite concerts offer, and that there are, like, VR DJing games and even Fuser to an extent, though I'd say it's a little bit less cool, is you don't know what to expect from what you're going to see at a Travis Scott,
Right.
hopefully people don't die related, at a Travis Scott Fortnite concert. You know, like, you don't know what they're going to do, what you are going to be able to do. Like, the fact that gameplay can intertwine with that, I think is very exciting. Like, that's super cool.
It's also a great opportunity for musicians to make some money as well.
Yeah.
Because, like, if you look at how the streaming platforms have kind of muscled them out, like,
I wonder how that works on Fortnite. Isn't Fortnite free to play?
well,
I don't know
Epic will
anymore.
pay. Epic will pay you.
Oh yeah,
or,
they make microtransaction money.
or
Of course they do.
like microtrans,
Yeah.
and then also, like, you know, buying a hat with a logo on it or something.
Well, I think
like,
you can probably buy
it's
a
gotta
bunch
be-
of Travis Scott stuff. I mean, he's fine anyway.
Sure.
He's doing okay financially.
I
have a
wouldn't be
chicken
surprised if
nugget
he
that's Travis Scott branded, so
Oh my God.
his shoes go for thousands.
That's wild.
It's intense.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, isn't it? Is that's what to be a financially successful musician these days, you need a shoe,
Yeah.
which is, you know,
Do you?
where it's gone.
I depending on what you define as financially successful, I'm a musician and I don't have a shoe.
Yeah. Oh no, I made a declarative statement. I'm sorry. That was
Well, have you thought about it though? I'd wear one.
Oh no, you're
For the
right.
record,
Yes,
for the record, I very rarely wear shoes. So
I'm also.
oh god, that sock is so dirty.
no, is it? No, it's not. What's dirty about my socks?
No, it's okay. It's just yellowed at the top because of the
a
color.
A little
gold tip.
yellow to the toes, a little brown at the toes.
That's the brand. It's Gold Tip. What's wrong with you?
You got to get on those
Oh,
phone
is it a specific sock that's?
It's called Gold Tip. I don't know why. They're just comfortable.
I'm old fashioned. I have socks that one color. I've not achieved. No, yes, it's a big
guess
statement. Obviously,
you're-
there are lots of ways of being successful, but I know a lot of people who work in essentially outside of soundtracks, essentially working in where they're basically making music to put it on Spotify, and those people are struggling financially because there's not much money.
Well,
in
Yeah,
streaming
it's funny,
services
that
for-
debate-
Austin,
You have to have ancillary product. You have to sell your music
that's what I was gonna like. Austin,
either to a company or
you make
do
you make
products.
money as a musician from tours and merch, right? Like I feel like that's what I've always been told: is musicians make money from tours and merch.
These days, that's where the bulk of the money would come from. But
That's
the
what I'm
thing
saying about the
is,
shoes.
streaming and all that is the only reason they decry it. Like the huge, like the Metallicas of the world, the only reason they would decry Spotify and such is because it makes them so much less than the glory days of 90s CDs. Because in those days, you go to Best Buy and you pay like $21 for a 40-minute 10-track album, and it's the only way to consume music. You want one song, like look at James Horner. The platinum soundtrack sold 11 million copies because so James Horner made something like $30 million plus from an album where everybody wanted the Celine Dion song and didn't notice the hour of orchestral film music that came before it. And those days are done. So it's funny. I remember Bill Maher did a monologue about this.
Right, but new people are also like not making any money on.
But that's the
don't
thing.
remember the CD glory days.
I've never understood. But
like where do you? So let's use you. Like, am I right in
Use
assuming
me.
most of the most of the money you make presumably is from the companies paying you to do soundtracks and then from live and merch, right? It's your
I don't really
Spotify
do merch other
doesn't
than
move.
vinyls. So yeah,
Sure,
I mean,
Spotify doesn't move the needle much for you. I'm assuming in terms of the money you're making.
I can
regularly.
pay my rent from Spotify. Like
That's good.
That's that's high. That's higher than I was expecting.
I'm very lucky because if it but the Abzu, Banner Saga, and Journey, it's several million streams per month
that's not a
combined when
small
you add
amount.
the whole. Yeah, and
that's what it. Okay, so that adds up to you. So that's my point: is just to do like 7 million streams a month pays your rent.
well, it's not 7. It's less than that, but it's a couple. But point is, it's not it. I don't. It kind of just so pays it's like the bills are covered, but I couldn't really live on it.
Sure.
But the point is, I'm also
that's
small
all I'm
fish
saying.
compared to a lot of folks out there.
But they're smaller fish, right?
There, of course, but this is why I've always found this line of reasoning very bizarre, because being a musician has, for all of human history, been one of the most difficult and unequally distributed career paths.
Like being an actor.
This is why why most parents are like, if the kid goes, I kind of want to play guitar and sing, or they're like, oh, please, anything else, because they don't want their kid condemned to a life of destitution. It has always been, and the
Same
thing
applies
is,
to Twitch streamers. That's the thing now. Everyone thinks you get rich. It's 1%.
if
less?
that, and same, it's the same in music. So the number of people, I think there's a lot of very bad statistical analysis going on when people say, oh, the streamers have screwed everything. Yes, there's no question that the lower barriers to entry, the sort of technological disruption has probably brought net revenues down, although it is growing again for the first time in 20 years because those streaming revenues and also things like vinyl have been actively growing in ways that all other physical media have been in decline. It's still smaller than it was, but the reason it was bigger before is because it was a a sort of market bubble like the .com bubble prior to its bursting, because you wanted one song and you had to spend $20, and the 90s was like a fairly roaring economic time in general. So there was like those prices weren't the norm. They were an artificial high, and the market corrected with new technology.
But the criticism of new musicians, I'm genuinely, I'm basically prodding you because it's interesting. Like I'm interested in your take on this. So the argument I've heard from musicians who are basically rocking the Austin numbers, like maybe hitting a couple of million a month, but it's not enough to live off of. Basically, their criticism isn't I should be a millionaire like in the 90s. It's Spotify makes much like the cut of what I get should be bigger from the subscription of the person.
And that is a fundamentally different argument. And yes, Spotify, for me, the jury is perpetually out there because...
It's breadcrumbs, right?
Yeah, I would make that argument with YouTube as well. The amount of money that they make.
I've heard the same argument made about YouTube for sure.
Yeah, and there have been people that say, it like the way Spotify's business model works in general is their users subscribe. I believe there is a free model with ads, although I honestly can't remember because I subscribed so long ago. I don't actually remember what the alternatives are, but I believe there is a free with like limitations on how much you can stream.
There's a free with like ads and then a couple of subscription levels.
Yeah. I think. So, but basically, let's say they make $1 billion, a year from their subscriber income. Setting aside their internal costs, staff, servers, blah, blah, blah. And there's people that would argue, they're like the things you always hear, like their CEO makes way too much money, blah, blah, blah. Whatever. Setting all that aside, if you're just looking at what's getting paid out to the artists and to the record labels and to all of that, it basically just says, okay, here's the pot of money we made. And now we're going to distribute this based on, like if we made, let's say the net revenue after we subtracted our costs is 800 million, and now we just basically divide it up based on how many total streams and how many of those total streams were each individual artist. Like it's more or less a straightforward conversion that yields a stream, like a dollars, which is some 100 millionth of a penny, but some streams, like how many dollars per stream does that end up yielding? And a complaint that I've heard that I think is a valid criticism is, if I pay $10 a month to Spotify and most of my money is going to go to the Taylor Swifts and Adele and whoever is sort of earning the most, but I never listened to them personally. What if I spent all of my money listening to, Abigail Barlow and Emily Bear Bridgerton musicals? Shouldn't the lion's share of my $10 go to them? And because I'm using Spotify for their product, not for, even though technically I have access to the entire Spotify library of hundreds of millions of songs. And I think that is an interesting thing where you're kind of saying, rather than a general pot that is then divided equally and whoever has the most streams wins, it's actually catered to what are you listening to, and let's make sure that those are, and I was like, honestly, that would be the fucking, because then it would still stratify heavily, because obviously the vast majority of artists, I mean, there's something like 60,000 songs per day that get released on Spotify. It's something bananas. So of course, the vast majority of those are going to have zero income because there's just no one hearing them. But
and that's fair. To be clear, I don't think many musicians are complaining that if I upload something to Spotify and it gets 10 listens, I should be rich. I don't think that's. I think it's more the complexity of what you're talking about. It's also terrifying, to those of us, especially in games, right, where games right now people still are willing to pay for. We'll see how that lasts, right? That's the idea of video games ending up in a similar kind of place to a Spotify or a Netflix is scary.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, the thing that's exciting about it is it has made the entire music industry DIY. You don't need a label. You don't need. I mean, look at Phineas and Billie Eilish. It's like in a bedroom with a laptop, with no fancy equipment, released, album of the year as practically teenagers.
I have a friend, his name's Ricky Montgomery, who is in a band called the Honey Sticks. And, I've known Ricky for a while, whatever. And I just made a TikTok recently and discovered that Ricky is a super popular musician on his own outside of the Honey Sticks, just as Ricky himself, which I had no knowledge of whatsoever, because a bunch of his songs, 2 of them, went super viral on TikTok. in the last 12 months, to the extent that he now has millions of listens on Spotify. And that was him outside of the band doing it himself, I believe, from an apartment during COVID. Just happened, like super successful, and is now signed and independently touring and all that, which is wild. It just happened because 2 songs went viral.
And see, like this is why I say, yes, of course, the per stream, especially from Spotify, is extremely low paying, and it's really, really rare to, like, I do well, and I couldn't live on it solely. Like, if I weren't getting paid to write scores, I'd be in
I'm the same with
dire
YouTube.
straits.
In theory,
like,
I get millions of views on YouTube, but I couldn't afford to live on it. Whereas the Twitch model is probably the one that would be more interesting to see ported over to musicians somehow, is that most of your funding comes from individual subscribers subscribing to you.
And that's Bandcamp's whole play. That's the Bandcamp model of, like, you're buying directly from the artist. Bandcamp offers a Patreon-esque subscription service that you can, like. And the thing is, as was pointed out by a great independent musician / cellist named Zoe Keating, the big difference with all these tools, which are really wonderful, they put so much power. You're no longer being gate-kept by record labels. You can do anything you want, and if it goes viral and all that, like, yes, it's still low probability, it's still random, but there aren't suits blocking you the way there used to be, which is why I think it's better than the 90s by 100-fold. You don't have to go to expensive retailers. There's so many ways to discover and share your art, and to me, it's very,
it's
very
awesome.
exciting.
We get more variety that way too. It's great.
But
it is awesome.
I will acknowledge that implicit in that, as Zoe Keating said, is that because it's like it made it more doable, but also slightly sort of blue collar in a way, and you essentially have to constantly make and release new music forever. Rarely will you,
like, to a ridiculous extent, right?
Yeah, like,
I know musicians who actually have to put out, like, a new single every week or whatever just to keep the algorithm happy with
YouTube,
Spotify
that's
to
Twitch.
say.
That's the same thing.
Yeah, and that is
Whereas
a big difference.
I'm sat here in the game side, like, where that's, and a reasonably successful indie like myself can have a team and can be, a viable business. And it's terrifying, the idea that this could one day be similar, that we would basically have to, bootstrap everything with small teams. And
it already is stratified to that degree that there are really small teams, and then there are really huge teams, and there aren't lots of mid-sized teams, because, like we talked about last time, you can justify $1 million budget, and you can justify $100 million budget, but it's really hard to justify a $30 million budget or whatever.
But what scares me is basically using your rent money to make a game, because that would be difficult.
Yeah.
If we ended up in a situation like that, that's the point I'm making. Is that's if the bottom fell out to that extent, that would be very.
Yeah, but I would think it's also cheaper to make a song. It's cheaper to make an individual song.
Oh,
and that's the question, right? To the end consumer. Does it feel like a song? Like, if you think about, like, Netflix costs about the same as Spotify,
I see what you're saying.
So it's an interesting kind of.
How
I don't
are we
know if the market
long-term?
would value that.
Well, that's Game Pass. Like, we'll see how that goes. It's interesting.